So,
All right.
welcome to Effective Communication and Player Management. I'll let PT start us off, and then I'll get started on this.
Yeah, thanks, Mel, and thanks to everybody for joining tonight. Before we go any further, can I just ask that everybody, when you're not talking, you just mute your microphone, just so we don't have a lot of background noise for Mel to have to compete with. If you've got a question, depending on what Mel says about questions, then by all means fire it back up and ask the question. But just for the time being, that's one piece of housekeeping. The other piece of housekeeping is just to let you know I'm recording this session, partly because we've never tried to record anything like this before, so just to see how it all works and get our head around it, but also possibly to then be able to make it available after the fact. So, as I said, thanks for everybody for joining us. I really just want to congratulate everybody for being on this webinar tonight. Really, as coaches, I think education is absolutely key, and the more that coaches can learn, obviously then then use, the better that they can coach for their athletes. And at the end of the day, that's what we're here for, is for our athletes. So I want to thank everybody for being here to learn. As I've always said, long before I was in this role, whenever I've been involved in coach education, even if you only get one thing out of tonight's session, it makes you a better coach. It's the one thing that you can apply and use down the track, then your time here tonight has been well invested. So I'm sure you'll get plenty from tonight. Mel Hunt, who is obviously leading the session for us tonight. Mel is one of only, I think, 3 level 2 coaches in our region, and it's a huge credit to Mel that she has really put herself in that education space and really gone out and gone and acquired a level 2 through a lot of time, effort and hard work, and huge congratulations to Mel for doing that. Mel's been in a coach education role for us all year. For AFL North Coast, it's been a big priority this year, particularly around the junior space. And Mel's been out. She ran a session at the start of the year for us as part of her Education Roadshow. She's been out watching coaches in action. And then from there, this is sort of the last phase of what we're doing for this year. And this is really building on what she's seen and learned over that time. Aside from her coaching side of things, Mel has been a teacher for a number of years now, and has progressed through those ranks as well. And earlier this year was appointed to a principal's role. So she's not only a teacher herself, I guess she is an educational leader. And some of what we'll cover on tonight, it comes as much from, I guess, Mel's knowledge and expertise as a teacher as it does from her time and expertise as a coach. So I guess we get the best of both worlds in that respect. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Mel.
Oh, thanks, PT. That was very kind of you. I guess probably before I start, it's important for you to know that I'm certainly not an expert, and the brains trust in the room and here certainly will far outweigh my experience and coaching. But I have been coaching for a number of years now. In fact, over 10 years I've been coaching AFL for. So I guess my experience over that time, plus my experience in education, has allowed me to take this role on this year, which has been really good. I think also too, it's really important to acknowledge that, I continuously learn every time I coach as well. And I'm certainly a far from perfect coach. We'd all like to be that perfect coach, but it doesn't always happen that way. So I guess acknowledging that, we all have days, or we all have times where we're not coaching at our best, but how important it is to be able to continue to improve ourselves through education, but also self-reflection, which is a super important of our job. So without talking much more, we'll get started. This is from the 2015 National Coaching Conference opener.
Tucks it under his arm, have another bounce, and he does. Marches, He just puts the foot on the accelerator. He draws away. What a magnificent run. Can he cap it up with a goal? Yes, he can. He's going to launch his neck and take them on. Oh, that was huge. Biggest win ever, Gold Coast. I do tend to react sometimes, which frustrates me.
Like he didn't wear a left hook, I reckon. Well, if ever was going to coach, I didn't want to make the same mistakes that some of them made in my eyes.
You've got to show me all the guts and all the determination you've got in your body. You've got to inspire me.
If I see one bloke walking out of here, give the pat and back from people out there for a good effort, I'll spew up.
We got a bit of Churchill, a bit of Karl Marx, and a bit of the Bible in our pre-match addresses.
Do something! Do! Don't think, Mick! Don't hope! Do!
You got 45 young men, some hinged, some unhinged.
All senior coaches are weird. And once you stop playing, you still want to get the thrill of the chase.
Come back in this way! It's coming inside! Read it like a book. How good is that?
Nothing more tigerish than a bloody tiger. And try and mind the bloody forward pocket, okay? And you probably don't even know what I'm talking about, do you?
If they kick one from the boundary line, so be it. Oh!
So there's a stage where you've got to bang him, and then you put him off.
Greg, that's twice the first time. Mentally, physically, it's going to be one of those wrestles.
Keep your heads, communicate, tackle.
The feeling of satisfaction that I got from it was better than any feeling that I was getting playing the game.
Pops the inside 50 once again. Great mark. Harris loves to have a big slide. She's a very exciting player.
That's the final siren. Man on! Get the finish!
Free kicks are good, so there's less ball-ups now.
Nearly got him. In guard! Oh, the baby! I tell you. Should have been hard on Hammerbury. They could take his man. Oh, danger! Cut off. On to kick a second. Who knows? Right, Jack. Great tackle. They got him. The best team of the modern era of the last 50 years produces its masterpiece. They've never been better than this.
Sorry, I'll just flick back into the presentation. Okay, so we all know that effective communication is where, you know, you have communication between two or more people and the intended message is successfully delivered, received and understood. And when I was doing a little bit of research in preparation for this presentation, I found a quote from Peter Schwab that he said in 2013, and he said, a key ingredient in any relationship, but communication is only effective if it's relayed in a way that makes certain that important information is understood and if need be was acted upon. And we'll certainly cover that later on in this session when we get into management of players during game day and also management of your coaching staff as well. And I think that, you know, we all know what effective and ineffective communication is, and particularly in terms of coaching in AFL, that the style of coaching has changed so much over the years, and gone are the days of those coaches screaming at players and things like that. We all know that it's no longer acceptable for us to scream at our players. It's not okay to do that. And that's certainly, you know, starting to become less likely. But let's have a look at some of the best, because as I was saying, some of us have good days and bad days, and here's some bad days.
What do you mean? What are you bemused at?
What do you think I mean, Richard? What would you really think I mean? So we just like to think that we're going to have an even playing field.
Thanks for your time.
Is that the best spray you've ever popped?
Yeah.
I've had a couple in my time, but yours look worse.
Yeah, I just looked out in the ground and you know that song, Hello Darkness, my old friend.
Hello darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
But to me, it's coming to cut. Your bloody not switched on properly. You could have run and intercepted that first goal, or second goal in a run, and you probably don't even know what I'm talking about, do you? And bloody right.
I answered that question already, champ. I said I'm worried about next week. If you want to worry about grand finals, you worry about grand finals.
What's your name? Yeah. Shane. Okay, that's the best question you can come up with after 2 hours of footy. You're quite brilliant, Shane. Yeah, terrific.
Have you been annoyed by this talk?
We've got a game to play, mate, and what do you think? It's not pleasant, we don't want to be here, but we are, and we'll move on with the game. Thanks, guys.
So what's interesting, especially in terms of the aggression that you see in some of those coaching snips is, and particularly in terms of the way that society is at the moment, we have a lot more kids that suffer from trauma. And one of the things that comes from that trauma is, you know, there's a saying that people will either fight, flight, or freeze. And so often you need to keep in the back of your mind when you're addressing your players that you don't know what kind of issues are going on behind the scene for any of your players, regardless of whether they're junior or senior. And the way that you treat and act towards those players can certainly have an effect on their mental health and well-being. So it's always worth keeping that in the back of your mind when you're coaching. So some of our examples of ineffective communication that we saw, of course, were pointing and yelling and screaming, a lack of positive criticism, swearing, very little player engagement, a lack of goal or message, an invasion of space. You know, we all know ourselves, if someone's screaming at us, we're certainly not going to take that message in compared to if they were speaking to us in a different tone of voice. Which leads us to that effective communication, and that being able to do that, you'll engage your players a lot more, being positive, having clear instruction and key goals. Players having a voice is really important, and also the use of voice from the sideline. And what's interesting and important to remember in this is that particularly at the moment in education, we're talking about how we engage our learners and engage our kids. And especially for those that are coaching youth teams, you know, if you're talking longer than a minute, you'll lose the kids. They'll get sick of it and they'll start zoning off, or they'll start doing something. So trying to make sure that when you are communicating that you're really making sure you're getting your key point across, and often repeating that key point as well is a really key strategy. We also know that sometimes adults are the same and they tend to zone out as well. And I think it's important to remember when you're at training as well, game day address we'll talk about later on, but particularly in training with our players, talking for 5 or 10 minutes of a training session before you're actually doing something is not effective, and you need to be moving your training session quickly. You know, the way that you design your training session in terms of your development throughout the session, from starting from one drill and perhaps building that up throughout to the final drill that you run in the session. If you're planning and training your session and thinking about it, you shouldn't have to talk a lot. It should be really quick. And also another good strategy that you could use, particularly with younger players, but I've found it in women's as well, very, very useful, is having a visual, because sometimes, you know, people are visual learners rather than oral learners, and so they they pick things up a lot quicker if they can see something. So I know that myself, especially when I'm introducing new drills that might be a little bit complicated, the visual aspect going with that can make a difference to the quality of my session. And of course, you know, we know that we're all bound by the code of conduct that we're all expected to agree with, and some of that stuff in terms of what we just saw, you know, being supportive and refraining from personal or physical abuse and unnecessary physical contact with your players is obviously important, but also consideration for your maturity and ability levels for your players when you're designing your sessions and when you're thinking about your game day, making sure, and this is a really important point, 5 to 18-year-old group, is ensuring that they gain equal playing time. And we'll talk about that a little bit further on, because my challenge to you would be, particularly even if you're coaching in senior, if you're only coaching your player for 1 or 2 positions, you're not actually doing them any good, because in the reality of it, often the people that get to the senior leagues don't ever play in a position they've played in the past. Usually they're put into different positions. And so if we want to be able to give our athletes the best opportunity, then we need to be doing the right thing by them and giving them a really good grounded understanding of the game and every position in the game early. And the earlier we do that, the better our footy will become across the board, and the quality of our footy will become better, because we'll have more players understanding the full game rather than just certain sections of the game. And then obviously we always have the bits about positive behaviour and positive environment. Skill learning is really important, and I'll touch that later on as well in the game thing, because one of the things that I'll talk about is when you're on game day, when you're doing your coaching and you're addressing, that is certainly not the time to be coaching a new skill, but it's more about working out what you need to focus on and then just sticking to your three or 4 points. I think, does someone have their mic unmuted? Hopefully that's fixed it. I just want to show you this clip here, because this is a game day coach between 2 teams, and just the way that these coaches interact with their players, it's a really interesting thing to see.
Sorry, boys, I'm thinking of a heart attack. You boys have been awesome tonight.
Take a breath.
You can't avoid stress altogether without that question. There's an element of this game where there's... When I was a kid and I was kicking footy myself in the backyard, this is what I dreamed of. You dream about kicking goals and you dream about taking marks. When you're a coach, you dream about like tackles, chases, pressure. The best my way right. You've got to get the footy as well. I was thinking today, 3 to 5 on 5 footy game, who would win? Sanderson, Camporelli, Bickley, Milburn. So 1, 2, 3, 4, Bailey versus Buckley, Lappin, Ben Hart, Scott Burns, Robert Harvey, and Rocket Ed.
Something that's bigger than you. You don't have to be the whole thing. You don't have to solve the problem all on your own. You've got mates that can help you. You've got mates in the coach's box that will communicate with you and let you know what we're seeing. You've got mates beside you that are going to help you achieve your role by doing theirs to the best of their ability. And when you're down, they're going to pick you up.
We've had 10 days just this sitting in our guts. We've had 10 days of it. Tonight, we get the opportunity to do something about it.
I love it. This is what we do. This is what we love to do. We're excited about what we're building.
We've got to look in the eye tonight. I'll tell you, it's there. I'm looking at you and I'm feeling
it. Each of you with an opportunity to set the agenda for yourselves and for your teammates. 30 seconds to have a think about what that feels like, what that looks like, what it means to you, and what it's going to mean to your teammates.
It's time to go to work. It's time to go to work, boys, for 120 minutes. Let's do it.
Pressure, pressure, pressure. Come on, let's go.
Dumb.
Tell you what, you're nowhere near it. You're nowhere.
Where are we going now?
Play on. Number 9.
And what are you boys doing down there? Watch. Don't watch the ball. Watch around the contest. Tell the medical team.
Reacting.
Fully an hour, lucky bit.
Good. Big thing to tell you.
Tell Chuck to go back. Tell Chuck to go back. Jesus Christ. Sake, boys.
You keep being brave, keep moving the ball forward, keep forcing it forward.
Come on.
And pick the ball up.
It's really hard tables.
And leading at 3/4 time by 14 points.
Inside. It's an awesome challenge. It's an awesome challenge. You're smashing him inside the contest and you're beating him outside.
You've done it for 3 quarters. I challenge you to do it before. When it comes, take it.
We have had times that the scoreboard looked favourable for us and we haven't finished it off. I urge you boys, for each other and for what we're trying to build, everything you've got for this 30 minutes. Contested ball, pressure, and be brave. Take it on and run so you have nothing.
The last challenge is I need 22 crows. This jumper that you're wearing today now defines if you're a crow. 22 of you now for 30 minutes of playing like crows.
The win over Bucks.
Quick, boys. That'd be the top 4 side.
There's nothing pretty about that. There's no redeeming numbers there at all. There's nothing.
That was awesome, okay? Absorb as much of that as you can, just for a short time. Enjoy it, because you just beat a top 4 side. Okay? And you can see the energy and the excitement that creates around this place. You should be really proud.
We had blokes that looked like they accepted fatigue and didn't work hard enough. That hurt.
Okay, you're going to get hounded now about, are we back? And, 4 and 4, we're in the 8, all that stuff. Just keep a lid on it. We can beat a top 4 side. We're really proud of that. We owed our fans one. We owed each other one.
This is not the end of the world. We lost the game of footy and we performed poorly. This is not the end of the world.
My fundamental drive is to create an environment for each bloke to tip into and to grow, and I've got an absolute belief that give us the best chance of success. That's the essence of it. That's what we're looking for.
It's all about being hard for longer.
So as you can see, even in that high pressure situation, the way that they addressed their players during their addresses was really effective and didn't need all of that screaming and carrying on that sometimes we see on the big screen when we see that stuff. But part of the things that we talked about, or that I've observed during the season, is just in terms of running through the day, and I know you guys know what you're doing. You're all certainly very capable coaches, but I think that just to sit and think about what we're doing and how we should be doing it, or some effective ways to do that, it might just help you change your game a little bit. So in terms of pre-game, this is where obviously you set your tone for the day. So one of the important points for that is that all of your hard work should have already been done at training. So it's not a day for lots of information, because your team's probably not going to remember it anyway. And making sure that you've got your, being prepared, having your board ready. simple messages that match what you've done during the week are really important. And those simple messages, you know, 2 or 3 key points is plenty, regardless of whether you're in under 9s or whether you're in first grade. That 2 or, you know, 3 or 4 key points is really as key for you in terms of your coaching during the day. The other thing that, of course, is using a timeline that's consistent, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but also to talk to your individual players for specific roles, because sometimes a whole group address doesn't need to happen if you need to talk to just 1 or 2 players, something there. And another good thing is using your line huddles there. So, you know, putting your forwards together or your mids together or your backs together and getting them to talk about that. And the other thing that happens with those line huddles, if you do that, is you start to develop leadership within your team, and you start giving the players ownership of what they're doing on the field. And that can be much more effective than you addressing the whole group all the time. So in regards to your board, you know, everyone loves using their board in different ways, but there are some things that I've seen that are really great examples, and then there are some that, you know, are the bare minimum, and there's nothing wrong with that. But just so that you can consider perhaps the use of your board and think if there's something that you can do to certainly change it up a bit and make it better for your players. So obviously your board you needs to be clear and legible. You need your starting line up there. Rotations, if you're using rotations, colour coding is what I've found works best with rotations, and I've used that colour coding. We've used that with Matt Crawley in terms of the rep footy program that we've used, but I've also used that in just in my own team and found that the colour coding makes it a lot easier for players to get the rotation in their head. Of course, if you're going to be introducing rotations, you need to make sure that, you know, that's organised before the game, and your players and your runner are really, really clear on that rotation so that you can get it working to be effective for that. In terms of your simple message and game goals, that, you know, they're the key points that you're going to use in your pre-game address, and the key points or goals, you know, that you want your players to do. So that's really important. If you've got an assistant coach, having someone else manage the board for you during the game is good, because what happens is sometimes you can get caught up on the board and forget that you're meant to be watching the game, coaching the game, and doing that. If you've got someone else managing your board for you, that can take one of those jobs off your hand. And then having it ready before each break is really important as well. You know, you only get a very short time to address your players in those breaks, and if you're wasting your time sorting out your board, you're actually not doing what you need to be doing, which is coaching. If you use a timer is great. In senior footy, I find it's useful for me so that I can keep an eye on how long there is in the quarter left or where we're going, but it also helps me in terms of my rotation. And with your junior footy, you know, and senior footy as well, monitoring your player time is really important. So, you know, I talked before about putting your players in multiple positions to develop their own skills, and rotating your players through their line and then off can help as well. You don't need to rotate every player off the ground, but you may find that you do want to rotate everyone, particularly in junior football. You know, that's almost an expectation. Rotating in groups can work really well in junior footy as well, to allow all the players playing in different directions. You know, so it's about building the best player that we can, no matter their age. And that's really, really important. And I think another thing in terms of that is, if you are loaning players to another team, it's really, really important that, you know, you think about the players that you're loaning. Are you just giving your weaker players so that then your team is, you know, still going to be guaranteed their win? Or are you putting some of your best players into the other team and then challenging those players and saying to them, go over there and see if you can, you know, give it to us. It's about developing that. You know, there's nothing worse for any coach, you know, watching somebody come onto your team to fill in and then they just don't give it a good red hot go when you know they're a good player. That, you know, that's detrimental to the player, but it's also detrimental to the development of that player. So that's really important to make sure that that's happening. And I think for senior coaches, you know, you really need to manage your player fatigue really carefully. We play in a climate that is hot, and so player fatigue increases substantially with the temperature, and particularly, you know, those mids that work really, really hard. Thinking about how you're rotating those players to prevent fatigue for them so that they can get the best game that they can out of their time on the field. So I've just put up an example of what you could do for your game day. And the thing that's important about having a routine on game day is that all of your players, including if you've got junior players, your parents, are aware of how the day runs. And this sets up as well and tries to reduce some of that time of those parents or those other interested stakeholders in the players coming and talking to players during breaks. If you make it really clear at the start of the season with your player expectations to parents and players that, you know, once players arrive and once they're in your hands as your team, then they shouldn't be, you know, running off and going and grabbing a Gatorade. They shouldn't be, you know, going and having a chat with mum or dad at quarter time or half time to improve their game, because, you know, parents and other people often have the best intentions, but on the day, your job is being the coach. And so on the day, the messages that player are getting should be coming from you. So obviously, you know, part of the warm-up there, you know, hands and feet on the ball as much as possible is really important, and your dynamics and specific drills. And in my coach observations this year, you know, that's something that we do really well as a league. You know, that the warm-ups that happen and that I've observed this season are all really high-quality warm-ups. And you can tell that because the players know the routine, and often the coach isn't running that warm-up. You should have that routine so in play that your players can run that warm-up themselves. And it's a big leadership thing for your leadership group in your team as well. Particularly, you know, when I was coaching junior football and under 15 boys, you know, those boys need that leadership development, and that's a really important way for them to be able to get into the game, get it going. The kids, you know, thrive on that, being able to do that themselves. And if they know exactly what's expected of them, particularly when you get to finals footy, having those routines in play is really, really important. Your warm-up isn't a time for you to be talking to your players. You know, that should be just focused on warm-up. So during the game, it's really important to think about our key points of communication as coaches. So, you know, the things that we say can have an effect on the outcome of our game through our players and through our actions. So it's really, really important that, you know, we're looking for the coachable moments in our game. What are we taking out of the game that we can either improve our players' skill level in or change our game up and make it a much more technical or a much more successful game for our teams? Forget out the umpires, and I know that can be really challenging sometimes, particularly when emotions get high. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're there to play footy, and so we speak with the ball rather than with our mouths. Having your board ready is really important. I've already done that, and focusing on your 3 points for your team. Probably don't, you know, when your players are ready, make sure that board's ready before the break if you need to change the board yourself, so that then when the team get to you, you're ready to talk straight away. The only time that I would say that would be different would be half-time, which I'll touch on in a minute. Obviously, I find it really helpful to make notes during the game, because I forget all the bits and pieces that happen during a game otherwise. But the reason that I take notes during the game, and it's usually only 2 or 3 points a quarter, is it will help me. It'll help me plan my next training session, but it will also give me individual feedback for players or for areas if I need to give them those instructions. So, you know, that's really important. And I think when I started prior to my level 2, that was probably something that my level 2 really changed up, was the way that I structured my training sessions. Prior to that, you know, I'd just go and I'd find some drills that the kids liked, and we'd target certain areas, whereas through the level 2, I really changed the way that I plan my training sessions, and I actually have a whole year plan. It does change here and there for bits and pieces, but the development of the drills that I use throughout the season, certainly I take into account throughout the whole year. So the feedback for players is obviously really important, and I know particularly in women's and certainly in rep footy I've experienced it as well, where players are actually asking you for feedback. They want to know what they can do to be a better footy player. So keeping those notes is really helpful to be able to do that. Making sure that our constructive criticism is there. So it's all good and well pointing out something that someone did, but you need to talk about the decision that was made and try and take the personal out of it and think about the picture as a whole, because often if you're giving feedback to a player, it might affect more than one player rather than just an individual. Manage your emotions, obviously, keeping yourself calm if you can. This is a really important point, and often you forget about this when you're on the sideline. But when you're coaching, you're not just watching the ball, but you're watching the whole field. And I consciously try to remember to watch the whole field, many times during a quarter, so that then I can see what's happening everywhere, because we all know that, what's happening behind the play can certainly impact the game, particularly if we're losing structure with our team in an area, or, someone's not quite standing where they need to be in terms of that future vision for the game. So in your in your pre-game address, it's about engaging your players and making sure that everyone's on the same page, avoiding talking too much. Less is often more, and I think we saw that in that video with those two guys. Even when Buckley sort of said, take 30 seconds and just think about, what this game is going to look like for you. He didn't say a word, and that entire room was silent. You could see that he'd built that culture into his team. That kind of stuff takes work to build, but it's certainly worth the effort. Making sure you've got key messages there, being prepared and using your board. And I know a lot of these things tie in. Considering your players and your group, what may have worked for you as a player when you were younger, and coaching styles have certainly changed over the past, but what worked for you probably doesn't work for today's youth. They're a very, very different group of people. Using notes, avoid swearing if you can, focus on your team, and being clear on one voice. So my key, when I'm addressing my players, one voice is my code word. So as soon as I say one voice, the entire team knows that, okay, it's time to stop and listen, and my voice is the only voice that happens. It's just that little key for them. I think that also one thing that it's important to know, and I've witnessed it over and over again over the years, is the great big rev up that coaches give their players, that yelling and trying to lift their emotion and get them going and get them motivated. That's an okay tool to use, but if you use it every single time you address your players, it'll actually lose its effectiveness and it'll start becoming a demotivator. So it's worth certainly considering the way that you do that when you're using that. A rev up can certainly be helpful, but not every time. So during the quarter, of course, you're taking those notes of your coaching umpires, coachable moments. You're forgetting about your umpires. Talking to your players as they come off and on the ground is really, really important, particularly as with younger players. Often they'll come off and they're not sure why they're off, or they're not sure, particularly seniors, I might pull someone off specifically because I want to just talk to them about something right there and then, rather than using my runner because the message is too complicated. When you use your runners, and we'll talk about this later, your message needs to be really clear and easy for them to get across. So talking to your players, a little bit of feedback, that was a great mark, or that was a really good tackle, or, make sure before you're marking that ball, use your vision and make sure you know where you're looking for in the next play. Watching the whole ground. identifying your opposition players that are impacting the game is really, really important. And we all know, you know, those impact players can have a real effect on a team getting away from another one really quickly. So identifying those and then thinking how you're going to combat that with your team is really important. Managing your emotions, and then avoid barracking. Really hard to do when you're a passionate AFL supporter, but you know, when you're barracking, you're actually not coaching, and you're there, you know, you're not there to support and cheer. You should be there to coach. So they're always really hard, and you know, still things that I work on every week. Some weeks I do better than others. At the breaks, this is, you know, in your breaks, and some of the things that we saw or I've seen throughout the year is, you know, probably not utilising the time in those breaks as well as we could be. So, you know, coaching the player, you're not chastising or criticising someone, but you need to offer solutions and teach them rather than just identify a mistake. You know, one of the things that I have in my school is I'm quite happy for people to come and speak to me about issues they may have, but if they're going to come and talk to me about something, then hopefully they've thought about a solution as well, or some way, because, you know, if someone's got something, you need to be able to offer something in return to fix something. Focusing on the decisions rather than the skill errors. So skill errors, we know we always make errors. Everyone, you know, it's very rare that you'll play a whole game without making it one skill error. So it's actually the decisions that are impacting our game, not the skills. The skill stuff happens at training. So in terms of addressing that, you would address that through your drills, but certainly the decisions and your game day, you know, your game understanding is really important. Read your board twice when you're reading it to your kids. That's what I was talking about, the line huddles before. So getting your teams into groups and encouraging your leaders in your groups. Positive reinforcement, obviously. Keep it simple. That's the thing. Just keep it simple. At half time, it's really important that you let your players have a rest. You know, they probably need a drink, they might need a lolly, or they probably just need to just give themselves a couple of seconds to just reset. I always give my players, you know, especially at halftime, a chance to just get themselves regrouped, get themselves down. You know, mentally, they're pretty fatigued by halftime in a game, particularly if it's been a really physical game. And so they do need that time just to reset themselves, get themselves ready, and get themselves ready to listen to what they need to do for the rest of the game. Your external distractions, you know, and these can be parents and spectators. They're not the coaches, and it's really, really important that you remember that. And if you're confident enough, you make it really clear that during the breaks that you're the person that needs to be giving the messages. I've seen all sorts of addresses during breaks from team managers and runners and water carriers and parents and club members and all sorts of things, and it can get really confusing for people because there's so many conflicting messages coming in. It's really important that that message is clear and it's coming from the coach. And keep your emotions in check. You know, obviously yelling and screaming isn't really effective. So after the game, this is something that I think as a league we could probably focus a little bit more on, and that's warm down. It tends to get really easy to finish the game, go to the shed, and everyone just gets changed. So just trying to build that culture of warming our players down. You know, in our duty of care as coaches, it's really important that we're looking after our players and providing them that opportunity for the best chance of recovery for them. You know, some of those really physical games can really take it out of players, and it's so important that we provide that opportunity for them to warm down. I always do a quick player address at the end of the day. I don't, usually in this part, I won't criticise or I won't take apart our game. This is where, you know, you just want to be consistent with your address, and the outcome shouldn't change how you do that. Focusing on your positives before your negatives, recognising effort, those sorts of things, and be quick with your pre-game address or post-game address. They don't really want to hear you talking too much more by that time. So let's have a look at this.
Yeah, good.
Hey, Stu, just get out to Jaron Geary. Yeah, they're going to bunch one side like that. Absolutely, from a senior player's point of view, he's just got to own that dangerous space. No, but Dave, we're second of the ball. Now you're the man in there that's got to make sure that everyone that goes into the centre square or stoppage is putting their nose over the footy. We're just reactionary a bit much. So the game's going okay, but we can take it to another level if blokes like you go, I'm going to win the footy. Okay? What's that?
Ross, two. I reckon it looked like over there. It's good to have some repeats. That finish them as well.
Hey, well done, young man. Really, we get that score because of your good stuff. So here's the game for you. We spoke about it pre-game. You're either going to be fantastic in terms of winning the footy, because I know you're going to smack in. Every now and again, they're going to get in front of it. You're going to tackle it out of it. Good work. Well done. Hey, Gilbert. Yeah, really good start, mate. Backing yourself in to win the footy. Righto. It's pretty clear. The only way that Dell's opponent's going to get the footy is come at the leg. So as one of the experienced players back there, mate, look for opportunity to fill in that leading space, because that's his go. But keep talking to Dell. You there? Right, here's the go up here. We're toying. You're going really well deep. And obviously you're going to have to play deep when Bruce is in the ruck. But whenever we had this conversation before, whenever you need to come high and we're struggling to connect, then up you go. You got anything to I think so, mate. Yeah, look, say for example now, and Bruce is in the ruck, and we have a couple of guys that rebound and don't get it through. Because what happens is when we see you move, mate, we kick it to you. Yeah? Right up.
Where's Weller? Is Weller going to spit?
Hey, Stu, I want you to get out to Rui and just make sure that he keeps reinforcing the message to the rest of the forwards. Whilst 0 to 30 is working for us, the reality is we've probably got too many looking to go to that play. So what I want him to do is keep giving messages to the others to keep presenting. So Brucey's just camping out. So Brucey lead, Tim Membry lead. Rui can look to block for those and roll to that 0 to 30, yeah? Right.
Hurdle if you want it.
He said 7 for the game. 6 tackles.
Hey, Joe, we've frustrated the f*** out of it with our defence. So, absolutely, mate. And the boys, we've got our hands dirty. Our contested footy numbers are back up. We're really positive there. Other than that, mate, you just got to keep going. You know that focus we had, that 10-minute period. Yeah, absolutely. We're in that now.
Brucey's got to be down the line, Sammy, for that. Well, we came in there late.
Geez, their tackling has been enormous, mate.
And 24
really long.
That's what he's got to do. That's all he's got to do.
53 tackles for the half.
Really protect the corridor, especially
get out to Nick. Just let him know that on their kick-ins now, what they're doing is they're setting up a horseshoe. They're opening up the middle of the ground. What we've got to try and do there, in fact, definitely, give him the wide, just play inside our man. Now, just make sure he gets it done with the forwards. Gilbert, get out to Gilbert. No, we're through. Get him back. I only want 2 forwards.
Okay, so that was a really good example of effective use of your runner, and hopefully you noticed down the bottom it showed when they were talking about the runners. So something else that I've looked at this year is the use of runners and assistant coaches and other team staff. So I just want to touch on that really quickly. These are really obvious, but sometimes we're not in a position because, we run on a team of volunteers, but for you to keep in your mind, using someone that can run is pretty important, obviously, but they need to be a good communicator. So they need to be able to deliver your message exactly the way you want it delivered. There's nothing worse than having someone that's not a great communicator and then they get out there and they forget the message and then things don't happen the way that you're expected to see them. So, they're not the coach. Their job is to deliver your message. So that's, something for you as a coach to keep in the back of your mind. Having a relationship with the players is important. Being able to focus on decisions rather than skill errors, and leading the way in sportsmanship and behaviour. You know, that is really, really important. With your assistant coach, if you've got an assistant coach, you know, the roles need to be really clear and defined and specific jobs, and they obviously need to know what your game plan is. Complementing your coaching style is also really important. So if you're somebody that's a bit of a an out there extrovert coach, then having someone that's not as extrovert, you know, that really complements your coaching style, and that way you've got the opportunity to reach your kids that go with those sorts of style of people. Obviously, they're not the coach, but you want somebody that understands the game, but can also offer suggestions and give you some constructive criticism as a coach too, particularly when you're reflecting on your role and how you're going. Obviously, we also have team managers, and how you use those team managers is really, really important. You know, I can't do a game without my team manager. She keeps all the bits and pieces running for me behind the scenes, so I can just go and coach, which is what I'm there for. So being really clear with your team manager, you know, letting them know what you want and expect from them during the day. And of course, your water carriers are water carriers only. So, you know, they should not be on the field having conversations with players. They should not be running messages. You know, they shouldn't be on the field for the entire game. They should be on running water and off. You know, those sorts of things are really important. But that's got to come from you as the coach. You're the person that is in control of that team of support staff that you have. So you need to make sure that you're doing that sort of thing. So. So that's the end of our slideshow. I don't know why my references didn't come up, but there are obviously a whole lot of references. So I just wanted to thank you for coming today. I'm just going to try and see if I can get myself so I can see you. There we go. So I'm just wondering if anyone's got any questions or comments or anything that they might want to say or ask. Are there people still there?
Yeah, Mel, it's Alan Martin.
Yes, Alan.
Just one thing, I was just going to make a comment. Quite early in your presentation, you were talking about moving players and having them in different positions. One thing I've noticed while I've been doing this out here in the West was lots of people sort of, yes, they'd move the players, but they wouldn't give them time enough to perhaps settle in that position. So I just thought that it was probably worth just making a comment that if they do move a player, you know, and sometimes it could be from half forward to full back or something like that, which is quite a big change, they need time in that position to actually, I suppose, learn a little bit about the position and then, yeah, get a positive thing out of it, other than just being shifted just for the sake of being shifted. Yeah, that was just one thing that I sort of wanted to make a comment about.
Yeah, really valid point, Alan. That's so important, and often, you know, when we're getting to the rep level of stuff, kids often play in positions that they've never played in before, and or haven't played in for a really long time. So we certainly need to make sure that we're doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Just another comment was just recently we had an experience out here with some bad language, or I suppose overexcited supporters and coaches that stirred up the junior team. And it was really, really, with the stuff I've learnt by doing the coaches out here this year, it really, really was extremely obvious that the body language from the coach and the supporters basically stirred up the kids. And flowed straight through. Obviously, we've done stuff about that, but it was, yeah, just really, really, I can't make it more, I don't know, important that it's what the coaches, the body language, etc., is what carries through.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, 100%. You know, our demeanour will have an effect, an immediate effect, and an impact on the game.
Oh, look, it did, because I was actually umpiring that particular game not by choice either, PT. It was only because there was no one else to do it. But I was umpiring it, and the more vocal that the supporters got, and the more vocal the coach got, the more the kids got carried away, and then it ended up, one of their kids being sent off because of the hitting behind play, and then that escalated things even more. It was so obvious. When you know what to look for, it was so obvious, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
No, thank you for letting me comment.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Do we have any other comments or questions? Okay, well, I'd like to just say thanks for your time. I know giving up on a weeknight is, always not easy, particularly when you've got kids and families and other commitments. So thanks for giving your time up. I hope you got something out of it. I'm certainly only just sharing my experience and my research in the area at the moment. So hopefully you got something out of it. But if you get off here and you find that you've got something you want to say, you can certainly get onto me either through PT or through my email if you want to have a conversation outside of this forum. PT, do you have anything that you want to say?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Mel. And I guess, just like coaching, and everybody here obviously is a coach themselves, what we see on the day of coaching is the tip of the iceberg. What we don't see is the 5-6 hours worth of preparation that's gone into the 1 hour coaching session. And similar here tonight, Mel, everybody's, had the chance to sit through the session. I haven't seen the 5 or 6 hours plus that you've put into preparing this, which I know you have. So thank you for doing that. Very much appreciated on everybody's behalf. Just for everybody else here on the line, just in terms of some next steps. So obviously part of what we told you when we promoted this straight up front was that there would be credit given towards your reaccreditation process. I will be providing the names of everybody who was on the session tonight to Tim Schmidt and Darren Pfeiffer, who are the guys who manage that process for New South Wales and the ACT, and they'll take that into account. So just double checking just before we go, these are the people that I had down as having been here. Al Martin, Craig Christie, Craig Hundle, Ben Watson, DJ Crawls, Rob Dina, Steve Dawes. If there's anybody else out there, speak now or forever hold your peace.
And I guess, PT, sorry, I did forget to mention, doing the level 2 coaching, which I did over the course of 12 months last year, was probably the best thing that I'd ever done personally in my coaching. I know the game well. I grew up with it like many of you. Once you're a Victorian, you're always Victorian. But certainly the quality and the way that it changed my coaching and the way I think about my coaching was well worth the effort and the time. So, I can't recommend it highly enough. It'd be great to have some more level 2 coaches out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the last thing I was going to say to everybody tonight too is you're obviously dedicated to coaching, you're passionate about extending yourselves, hence the reason you've come to the session tonight or joined the session tonight. I do strongly urge everybody out there to think about getting involved in a level 2 course over the next sort of short period of time. The changes that have been made to the Coach AFL platform for delivery of level 1 programs, certainly I think the resources that are now out there on the website are far better than what we've had historically over the last year or 2 years. That's improved out of sight with the Coach.AFL platform. But at the end of the day, the foundation course, as it's now called, the level 1 as it previously was called, is a pretty basic course for people who've been in and around footy for a long time in their lives. Level 2 will really challenge you, really extend you, will really teach you a lot more about being a coach and really challenge you to think about the type of coach you are and how you go about doing your coaching. I know in the past, I'm not sure about Mel's course, but I know in the past the coaches relied very heavily on coaches from assistant coaches and the like from the Swans and from the Giants. So you're really getting some quality input from people who are doing this for a living. So normally there's a course run in Sydney sort of towards the end of the year, probably November-ish, And then this year there was a course run in Canberra, I think from memory, in February. So once those dates are set and once that information is available and they come through to me, certainly I'll be firing it out to all the coaches. And again, I would strongly urge everybody to look at that and seriously consider getting along to it, because it will take your coaching to a new level. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to talk, like if someone wants to do it and they need, you know, someone to talk to or through the process, I'm more than happy to share my experiences and what I needed to do to become accredited as level 2, because that's, you know, always helpful.
Right. So thank you, everybody. We've just about rolled that out on time, 6:31. Well done, Mel. Well done, everybody. So for those of you, I guess, out there who are coaching, you've still got a little bit to go in your season. Best of luck for the rest of your season. And as I say, I'll certainly send through that level 2 info when it's here. But again, thanks for your commitment to extending yourself as a coach, and well done.
Thanks, Mel.
Guys.
Thanks, PT.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Much appreciated.